Right. No, I get it all the time. Look, I'm talking about with rats. Okay, people, I want you to get rid of it, but I don't want you to trap it, and I don't want you to kill it. I want you to put it outside. Now, here in Florida, for me to trap an animal, I can do it without a license.
Yeah.
And what they want, the state says you got two options. You either euthanize it, or if you're going to transport it and set it free, it has to be on a property, private property, that's 20 acres or more, and you have to have the in writing of that landowner that you're allowed to release animals on his property.
You could do that with rats?
I don't know, because I've never seen that in the law or anywhere that I can move a rat, but
yeah,
we can get the rat out of the home through a repellent.
Yeah.
And basically get it out and let him go somewhere else.
Right.
So that's not an issue. But for us, it's like, well, you need 20 acres or more to move it legally, because if not, what are you gonna do with it? You can't, like, what most people do is they basically take it out into the Everglades and take it out into the homestead area where you have basically the, just farmland, and release the animal there. Well, that's illegal.
Sure.
According to the state of Florida.
Right.
So it's. I was just having this discussion, the same discussion in Jersey. Pretty much the same law. You need so many acres, and then. But the problem is everybody knows it, and I know everybody does it, or at least most people.
Well, you're right. It's an enforcement problem, and it really creates basically an underclass of everyone's wink wink. We all know what the law is, but wink, wink, we know we're not going to follow it. And so you basically create this underclass of just illegal behavior. See, in Massachusetts, you could not do any of that. You had to, if you took the animal off the property, it had to be destroyed, or you could release it on property. You could not translocate an animal at all.
Okay, so in other words, if you take it out of an attic and you do the repair on the building, you can release him right there, because that's where he was.
In the backyard. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. That would be legal, because that would be the person's property. So I call that relocation, because you're moving the animal within its home range. Translocation is when you're putting it in the back of the trunk and you're driving 20 miles and dumping it somewhere. That's translocation. Now you're taking it out of its home range, throwing it into a brand new habitat where it has to find food, shelter, avoid predators, and try to get out of the way of the weather within a day.
Yeah, because see, homeowners don't understand this. I mean, they
don't. But part of that's wildlife control operators and sometimes PCOs don't want to explain it to them.
Yeah, and educating the customer could cost you the sale.
Right. Well, I had the beauty of, I would have a document. I had a document from the Massachusetts Fish and Wildlife. It was their letter. It was their document. I just photocopied it.
Right.
It was part of my packet that I gave to every client, and I would have people tell me, well, the other guy said he would release it somewhere else. And I would say, man, he's either lying to you or he's breaking the law.
Yeah, it
so
can't
I
be
would
done.
throw them under the bus, without a doubt. And I would just say that when I'm taking them away, I said they'll never come back.
Right.
Okay, you don't have to worry about them coming back. So a lot of times it's that the problem is not the client, it's the PCO or the WCO. If you don't believe what you're doing is right, you're not going to sell it.
Yeah.
But the reality is, a lot of PCOs and WCOs, they know it's cheaper for them to dump the animal somewhere else.
Of course.
And plus, they have the potential revenue of more money because it might go offend somewhere else. So there's a little bit of money involved in there, right? If I take that raccoon and he's gotten into this house, well, he clearly knows how to do it. I can dump him 15 miles away, and he'll go into someone else's house, and I'll leave my cards in that area. People know I'm around, and maybe I'll get another job.
Yeah, it's the ethical issue that I have with guys all the time that says, why don't you just solve the roach problem and do it with baits and get rid of it on the structure? He says, yeah, but then once we get rid of the problem, then they don't call us back anymore. So we just keep spraying. I mean, it's so an issue of ethics.
Sure.
It's perfectly legal what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because you can, it's according to the label. The label is the law. You can baseboard spray, but you're never going to get rid of a German roach infestation by baseboard spraying. Right. And the customer says, he's here every month and I still have roaches. And I said, well, here's our process and here's how we do it, and we'll knock it out, and you'll never need us again unless you reintroduce the problem.
Right.
And so most companies want a contract. And I'm like, so it's an issue of ethics and morality.
Well, I also think it's a lack of faith, right? It's a lack of faith and understanding that there'll be another job. I mean, I have a colleague. His policy is when he goes to a client's house, because this is even worse for wildlife control, right? So, because with wildlife control, if you follow our directions, if a client truly follows our directions, the likelihood of them ever calling us again is almost zero. Now, I'm not talking about moles in the yard. I'm talking about an animal getting into their house. And let's put mice aside for a moment because that's a more difficult project. But if you're talking about squirrels, raccoons, skunks under decks, things of that nature, if you follow the directions of your WCO, the likelihood of you ever having an animal in your house again, bigger than a mouse, is basically zero.
Right. And it usually involves sometimes expensive repair.
Yes, but it's sometimes not. I mean, but the point is, you don't have to worry about a 20-year contract of baseboard spraying.
Right.
It's done. And so in a lot of people, and so that's very hard. In a lot of this is one reason why wildlife control operator companies often don't sell as well as PCO companies, because you don't have that recurring revenue.
Right.
But I think for PCOs, I would tell them, look, it's up to the client. You can say, look, we can try to solve this problem right now. And I think doing good always is going to get good. You may not become shoot the lights out rich.
Right.
But in the long run, it's going to work for your business. Are you thinking about your business just for the next 5 years? Or are you thinking about your business in terms of what you're going to hand to your children?
Right.
So what is your time horizon? If you're just trying to make a quick buck and you just want to chum some client along for a long time where you can simply solve their problem, well, then that's your decision. But understand, I think you're thinking too small, because the cockroaches are coming back.
Yeah.
Someone's going to bring them in again. If they were there the first time, they're going to come back in the second.
Yeah. Habits die hard.
Yeah. Sooner or later, it's certainly going to happen. But I think that there has to be, you always want to do what's good for your client. And I think sometimes we have to be sure we give the client options. Now, with wildlife control, certainly there can be expensive repairs. I mean, I saw a photo on Facebook recently where it was, I guess it was they said it was an elderly lady's house, and she just wanted their squirrels out of the house, right? And so, and the repair job that was done was not adequate, but probably the lady didn't have the money to afford it because the house was in very bad repair. And this is a situation where I disagree with the animal rights people. They're like, well, you don't need to kill animals, you just need to repair the house. Not everyone can afford that. Yeah,
that's been a constant battle that I have with people, where what exclusion might be in Florida because of the construction type.
Yeah.
We have stucco homes with tile ceilings. Very much easier to repair that type of home than if you got a 100-year-old house that's wood and has siding and cedar or whatever. What would cost here maybe $300 to $400 to do an exclusion, it's $2-3 grand or $5 grand to get that house fixed to exclude it. And that's always been a lot of the contention with guys is, I can tell them to fix it all day long, but the reality is the homeowner isn't or can't afford it.
Right. And so that's why I think it's important for us to always maintain the tools, because sometimes lethal control will solve the problem for the short period of time.
Right.
And yes, they need to fix their house, but I tell people, look, and they say, because they'll tell me, well, trapping doesn't work. And I mean, what do you mean trapping doesn't work? And they'll say, well, the animals will come back. I say, well, the animals I trap never come back. And they'll say, oh, well, others will come back. And I said, yes, why do you cut your grass? I said, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
They'll look at me, and some of them will get it right away, and others will be like, what? And I'll say, well, why do you cut your grass? It doesn't work. And they're like, huh? I said, because you have to mow it again. So why is it different with trapping? Why is trapping once a year a terrible tragedy, but mowing your grass every 2 weeks is okay? I hate cutting grass. It is the biggest waste of time in the planet. sitting there cutting grass. For what? No one's paying you to do it. I'm sitting there cutting grass, wasting my time cutting grass that's just going to have to be cut again. But yet when it comes to killing animals once a year, that's the big tragedy. And I'm like, how does that work? You'll spray bugs every week, and that's somehow not a failure, but trapping once a year is a huge failure. Do you see? There's a disconnect in people's mind. And I'll give you an illustration about the relocation, translocation thing. I would have people tell me, well, why? That's a stupid law that you can't translocate this animal. And I'll say, really? And I'll say, well, what if I moved all the squirrels into this neighborhood so I could do job? Oh, well, I guess it is a good law after all.
Right.
So again, it's how you sell it. If you don't believe it, you're not going to sell it.
Of course.
And I would explain it to people. And as soon as I explain to them that translocation is not as humane as people think it is, a lot of them were like, well, that kind of makes sense. But a lot of them didn't care about the humaneness of it. As soon as I told them that this might cost them more money down the road, oh, that was a good law.
Yeah. So yeah. Once we start talking about the money, people, they change their tune. Everything comes into light. But here's what people don't understand. What is the danger for that animal in cruelty?
Oh, it's terrible. So this is the debate. So there's the research is all over the map, because the reality is that not every animal is going to die, right? So some people will argue this way. They'll say, well, yes, that animal may die if I translocate it, but it has a chance. Like it's like a lottery, right? You know, if you win the lottery, you survive. Okay. Well, here are the reasons why you shouldn't translocate. Number one is it's really hard on the animal when you translocate them, because now it has to find food, shelter while avoiding animals. And if you do, depending on the time of year that you do it, it might have an environmental stress. For example, it's easier to translocate a squirrel, say in the summer, where it's warm, as opposed to the middle of February and it's freezing and it's sleeting rain.
Right.
Okay. So that's number one. Number two, it has to reorient itself. I mean, when they've translocated raccoons to different areas, sometimes raccoons would travel up to 15 miles trying to reorient themselves. That's pretty stressful. Again, it also, people don't think about, is there already too many animals in that location to begin with? The Americans have this mythology that there's this open space waiting, bring us your squirrels, bring us your raccoons, because we don't have enough. Well, that's really not true. What happens is then you're going to have interspecies competition for the limited resources that are already there. And then you have the problem of potential disease. That if either the animal is healthy and you move it into an area where there is disease, or the animal's sick and you moved it to an area where there was no disease. Look what happened to us with the rabies epidemic that occurred in the mid-1990s. We had, the belief is it was hunters from Florida took some raccoons, brought them up to, I think it was West Virginia, and they released them, and then they realized, well, some of the raccoons were dead inside the cages, and then they found out that they were rabid. And then you've watched the rabies epidemic, the mid-Atlantic rabies epidemic, march its way up the eastern seaboard. It hit our area in Massachusetts, in Springfield, I think it was 94, maybe 93, 94, if memory serves. I was removing raccoons left and right, and then it just went, I lost a third of my business. Went from raccoons being a third of my income for my business down to probably less than 5%.
Wow.
Because there were no more raccoons. We had about a 90% kill off of the population. It was just, we went vanished.
Because of the rabies.
Because of the rabies.